Hi guys. So today's video is going to be a recommendations video for people who are fans of Fullmetal Alchemist. Even if you're not a fan of Fullmetal Alchemist, but you end up being a fan of some of the other stories I mentioned, you might find that Fullmetal sounds like something intriguing to you. It follows these two brothers, Edward and Alphonse, who tried to use alchemy to bring their mother back from the dead, but things went terribly wrong. She did not come back from the dead, and one brother lost an arm and a leg, and the other brother had to have his soul attached to a body of armor because he lost his entire body. It's a little bit of a trippy plot, but it's so much more than just that. There are so many characters throughout the story that are extremely likable and have a lot of complexity, and then there are a lot of characters that are not likable, but they're still so interesting, and the level of good and bad, there's a lot of gray area, and it varies from character to character, and their motivations are realistic, or sometimes they're purely good guy, bad guy type motivations. Like I said, there's lots of in-betweens of that, and it's such a fast-moving, fun story. The recommendations I'm going to give aren't necessarily just because something has a similar plot. It's more of specific things that I think make Fullmetal enjoyable, and there are things that Fullmetal fans really love about Fullmetal that I think that you might also love about the other things I'm going to mention. A couple of those notable qualities, one would be, like I said, a huge cast of characters, but nobody that goes unnoticed. Everybody, you do know who is who, and you start to really care about so many of the characters. But beyond that, this is fast moving and at times feels a bit meandering because the characters are searching for something, or they are trying to get their original bodies back and they're trying to find answers to how they can do that. It sometimes strays and new characters pop up that you don't always think are going to play a huge role, or new plot lines pop up that you don't think are going to be a huge role, but everything kind of ties together in the end, and that's very reminiscent of a couple of the other stories I'm going to mention. The first recommendation for Fullmetal fans would be Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. This is a Japanese-inspired fantasy, and it is a traveling story, so you follow two characters, Yumeko and Tatsumi, who are trying to get from point A to point B, and they're trying to do this because they have this scroll, or they're trying to attain this scroll that can grant a lot of power. Something I loved personally about this story, it's not for everybody, but I really liked that because it's a traveling story, you don't really ever know what's going to happen next. Their main goal is always their main goal, but what happens along the way, you're never really going to know. It kind of keeps you turning the page, it keeps you guessing, and there are so many times that the writing style in this story I thought could be for sure adapted into some kind of a manga or an anime, just some form of a visual representation, just something about the writing style. It felt very alive in that sense, and I think because Fullmetal is a manga and it does have an anime, it's got that connection a little bit alongside the I'm not sure what's gonna happen next sort of story. The next recommendation is actually not a book, but I still to this day think it has one of the best stories out of any medium I've ever come across, and that would be Final Fantasy X. To me, the traveling aspects of Fullmetal, or the I don't know what's gonna happen next aspects, are done perfectly in Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X is a traveling story, and it is the definition of what a traveling story should be. You encounter new places, you encounter new cultures, and as the journey progresses, the character relationships start to grow, and there will be times that the characters clash, as you would expect to happen when people travel, because traveling is not always the easiest thing to do with other people. On top of that, another notable aspect of Fullmetal is that it has this perfect blend of sometimes being really, really dark and presenting some really sad, sorrowful moments with a combination of a really good amount of humor and just being still weirdly lighthearted. And Final Fantasy X, I think, also does that amazingly. Switching back to books, I also would highly recommend the Bartimaeus trilogy. This is a middle grade series, but it's one that I think is really enjoyable at a lot of different ages. One, it's really funny. There are so many fantastic moments. The premise is that there's a young boy named Nathaniel, and he summons a djinn to help him get revenge on his teacher, who is very incredibly mean to him. And this particular djinn doesn't want to serve his master. He doesn't want to serve anybody, and he has a lot of attitude, and he's constantly trying to scheme and see if he can get out of his commands, and it provides for a lot of fantastic dialogue and banter. What makes it similar to Fullmetal, one, is that it does pull off, once again, that lighthearted tone, while still having some really tragic moments. Also, the magic in the Barnabas trilogy is sort of similar to the magic in Fullmetal. Obviously in Fullmetal it's based off of alchemy, hence the name Fullmetal Alchemist. And in this series it's not alchemy, but it's somewhat similar. They still have to draw things in order to summon these creatures, so it's not just elemental based. I just think the tone of these books, the humor, and the amazing, amazing character growth and ending are definitely worth it if you're a fan of Fullmetal. If some of these have been a little bit too on the younger side for you, then I would actually recommend the Dresden Files. These, I think, are some of the few adult fantasy books. They're urban fantasy, I believe is the technical genre for this, but they are some of the best when it comes to humor, and I don't know that I've encountered too many other adult fantasy books that are as fun as these ones. I wouldn't say there's a ton of similarities. Beyond that, it's mostly just a really, really fun time, but that's what I think about Fullmetal in a lot of ways. It has that emotional depth, but it's fun overall, and I think that that is true of the Dresden Files series. Lastly, I actually did the reverse. When I did my recommendations for fans of Stormlight Archive, I mentioned that you might like Fullmetal, and I'm gonna have to basically say the same thing now. If you're a fan of Fullmetal, you might like Stormlight Archive solely because Stormlight Archive is one of the few examples of a story with a huge cast of characters, but you really get to know them. I think a lot of times books that have a huge cast of characters can suffer from just having a lot of characters and you don't actually really get to know them very well. And it's not about the amount, it's about how much you really care for these characters and connect with them, and I think in Stormlight, I don't know there's another series whose characters I connect to more than Fullmetal. I shouldn't say connecting to more, I more mean that I don't know that I've come across another series besides Fullmetal and Stormlight that has this many characters that I care about so much. So for that alone, if you like Fullmetal, I know these books are massive, but I highly, highly recommend Stormlight Archive. That's it though for my recommendations for fans of Fullmetal Alchemist. Let me know what you would recommend. Let me know if there are any series that you think, like I said before, maybe the plots aren't similar, but there are certain elements that you think are really similar. If you like these recommendation style videos, I'll go ahead and link a couple more right over here. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.